Hi, this is Mark Henry back again to give you information on the occult and paranormal. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about the subject of omen signs' importance for a better life. But I want to first by starting to talk about what these things are. It reminds me of when I did the video on Wicca, witchcraft, and sorcery, that they're different, but they are in some ways share some similarities. And I think in the same way with right here, we're talking about omens, portents, and signs. For example, when we're talking about omens, what we are discussing is those things that signify a future event coming to pass. There's some type of stimulus that catches the brain, and you're like, oh, okay, so that means that in the future X is going to happen. I'll kind of give you an example. Let's say that you are wondering about the future, just in general. You're wondering whether you will have good fortune or bad fortune the next month, and you happen to be Irish. So let's say the day that you are intensely wondering about this, you look down and you see a four-leaf clover. That could very well be an omen based on this context. And you look around and you see no other four-leaf clovers around. This one happened to catch your eye in your yard in the midst of contemplating your future. Possibly an omen. Now, when we're talking about signs, signs is kind of a general term. Signs can be omens and portents, but the other way doesn't work. Omens and portents aren't necessarily signs. And I'll explain why. So, signs are any type of, again, something, it's usually something symbolic, type of information that you get that confirms uh, whatever you are thinking about. I know that sounds kind of vague, but I'll kind of give you an example. It's much easier to do that. Let's say that you're having a hard time in your life, running into some trouble, and you pray to your higher power. Let's say if you are a Christian, you say, God, give me a sign that these things will pass very soon, these hardships, these troubles that I'm having. And then all of a sudden you receive, in that, let's say in 20 seconds later, it was raining and now it's stopped. Could be a sign. Rain is symbolic of, usually misfortune. There's a negative connotation to rain a lot of times, and if you are the person who kind of thinks that way, then the rain stopping could be symbolic of, hey, things are going to be okay. Now, I'm going to also explain in a few minutes the qualifications of what makes a sign and omen and important, but let me get through the definitions first. So the third concept is portent. Now, a portent is a type of omen in that it has to do with the future, yet with portents it's usually a negative connotation. It's something bad. It's something extremely unpleasant. For example, if you started to have visions of a natural disaster and it came to pass, or someone's death and they died, those are portents. I can relate to this because I normally don't get portents. However, in August of last year, I got a portent of, my neighborhood getting flooded, which was totally unexpected. And that was when we had in Louisiana, parts of Louisiana had the August, 2016 thousand-year flood, where 90% of my town houses got flood water in them, except mine. But I saw the portent. It was very unnerving, and sure enough, I got the vision of it coming down my street and couldn't sleep for a couple days. Sure enough, I wake up in the middle of the night feeling weird. I go down the street, here comes the water. So even with that flood, it wasn't expected to get to where I am, but it did. But in any case, that is a portent. Now, what are some, I guess, characteristics of the omen signs and portents? Well, one is that signs usually will occur in the strict sense in the present. So we're talking about the example of someone praying to God or whatever higher power that they subscribe to, and they were receiving a sign very close to the present and maybe about the present. Omens and portents, again, deal with future phenomena. Now, with omens and portents, something important to remember is that they usually occur unexpectedly as kind of a surprise and with pretty strong psychological force. It's like an aha or wow type of moment. They just come out of the blue. There's one exception to that, and that is when people practice divination. Talk about tarot, I Ching, runes, when they're trying to tell the future. In that case, I think that's a special exception because you're actually looking for patterns. And yet it still it fulfills the qualification of having to be struck because you have to connect with the information that you're getting. If it doesn't make sense, if you're not drawing the dots, connecting the dots, then that might not relate to you, or it could be off, or you're maybe not seeing what's going on in the cards, for example. So now that we kind of know what omens, portents, and signs are, let's talk just briefly about how to actually elicit them. Well, from what I can tell, in my own experience of other people I've talked to, and the research, the first thing that has to happen is you have to be mentally preoccupied with something. You have to be contemplating something, meditating on a particular matter. Usually it has to do with a question of some kind. When will this happen? What is this about? How will this happen? And then when you're so wrapped up into that, and it could be, on the other hand, you could be asking a direct question to your guides, your higher power, or your angels, or whomever you go to. You could be asking those questions about the future or the present, and then you let it go. That's the thing. If you keep on meditating on and contemplating on it, you'll be in such a headspace where that's all you're thinking about. You're not going to be paying attention to what's going on around you. And that's important, especially if your omen is in the environment, nature. You know, shamans used to be very connected to nature, and they would be doing some work, and all of a sudden, while they're doing one thing, they realize there's a sign in nature indicating, you know, well, the work that I did means this. So that's important to remember, that it's kind of, again, unexpected. Also, it comes with psychological force, and it should mean something to the person that is receiving the information. If let's say that if somebody, in the first example about the omens, about the person who happened to be Irish, wondering about his future, if a random person came by and he saw the four-leaf clover, he might think it's interesting. But if he wasn't thinking about his future, and if he maybe didn't happen to be Irish, where they have that sort of connection with something symbolically, that's why I mentioned it. I'm not talking about any type of stereotypes or anything, but there is a symbolic aspect to the four-leaf clover and the Irish which is how a lot of times we're communicated with in a symbolic way. If a random person came across that, it wouldn't be necessarily an omen, because what would that really mean to him or her? It wouldn't mean anything. It just means, oh, I happen to see something in nature that I rarely see. That would be it. All right, well, that's basically it. To recap, you ask the question, you think about a certain thing, you let it go, and then when you receive your information, then act on it. The person who got the information from the four-leaf clover that he was going to have good fortune, he should take that information and hopefully it'll encourage him to make his life even better, increase his good fortune. That is all.